All right. So folks, hopefully you all can see my screen. Nice to meet you all. For those of you I don't know, my name is Aaron Fung. Most of you probably found out about this through the LinkedIn events. And for those of you that didn't, welcome. Today, we're here to answer or attempt to answer the question, what is the Great Resignation for me? So you may have noticed that the original time was an hour. I dropped that to 45 minutes because if I can't get through this in 45 minutes, I'm wasting your time. Plus, I figured if anyone has additional questions and wants to stay on after the official piece of this is done, happy to stay on till the top or bottom of the hour. So as we go through this, let's start with just a couple of quick ground rules. First, if you wouldn't mind jumping into the chat and please sharing your name if you're comfortable sharing that, where you are geographically or physically in the world, and what you're looking to gain from today, that would be awesome. Next, I would love for this to be an interactive dialogue. I don't have all the answers, but I want to make sure that we address questions that any of you have. This is definitely not a time for me to practice my monologue, so please ask questions. The ask I have with respect to questions and comments is please be respectful and inclusive. If you have a lot of questions, I will do my best to get to them, but I also want to make sure that everyone who has a question has a chance to have their question answered. Okay, and then last but certainly not least, forgive me in advance because I have certain foibles. I don't plan on it, but occasionally I swear. Occasionally I make eccentric examples or metaphors. And I do this, of course, to be able to relate to people, but that's just me. I'm trying to be authentic to who I am. Now, before we jump into the actual agenda, if you have any questions, like I said, please leave them in the chat. I'll do my best to monitor them as I go. But for the 45 minutes we have here today, this is how I'd like to take it. First, I'd love to start off with answering this question, who the heck am I? And give you a little background on me. Next, why are we here today? What can all of you expect to gain from this or leave this session knowing we're better able to do? And then the core of our conversation today will be two pieces. First, that question that I posed, which is why does the Great Resignation or Great Reshuffle, depending on how you phrase it, matter to me? And we'll talk about 4 types, which each of you will fit into in some way, shape, or form. And then we'll talk about the career journey and ask a few questions around what matters the most in work. And hopefully each of you should be able to pick up some frameworks or ideas from those 2 sessions. We'll end with a pretty, straightforward thought process around what to do next. And then I will save 5 minutes at the end for questions that we haven't answered otherwise in the presentation. So as we jump forward, I'm going to throw up a poll question. Let's see if this works. 4 simple descriptions here, but the question is, how would you describe your current career aspirations? Are you comfortable in the role or organization you're at? You're not looking, but open to discussion. You're actively looking. Or you're like some of my friends and clients who say, don't put me in a bucket. I don't appreciate that. So take a moment and please just let me know what you're thinking about where you're coming from and what your current state of mind is. See, I knew there's always at least one person who says, don't put me in a bucket. So I appreciate that person, whomever it is. All right, we've got 13 of 18 people. So we'll get a couple more and then I will close it and we will move on. And by the way, for the folks who have just joined, welcome. Please feel free to leave a comment in the chat box as to your name, where you are in this world, and what you're looking to gain out of today. We are starting with a quick poll question around how you describe your current career aspirations. So I'll give that 10 more seconds, and then I'll close it, and then we will continue onward. All righty. So some very interesting results here. 56% of you are not looking but open to discussion. 25% of you are actively looking. 2 of you out there, 13%, are comfortable in your role or organization. And 1 of you said, don't put me in a bucket. I will respect all of that. So thank you all for giving us that perspective. I think it's certainly helpful for me to understand what this particular group is thinking, or what your current plans are these days. All right, so I'm going to take this down and we're going to move forward. So, as I mentioned before, Aaron Fung. Let's start with who I am personally, then I'll get to professionally. If you can see this photo, that is my son last summer, reading a wonderful magazine that says "Soil Yourself," which is, for any parents out there, deeply fitting. Parent of one son who's 2 years old now, and a soon-to-be unnamed baby girl who is coming at the end of September. Married. My wife Caitlin and I live just north of Chicago, but I'm from San Francisco originally, and definitely a New Yorker by attitude. My day job is I'm an HR strategist at SAP SuccessFactors, but my nighttime job, besides being a parent and sleep-deprived spouse, is I'm a career coach. And so I spend a lot of my time talking to people who probably are similar to you in that there's some confusion or some challenges that people are running into in terms of, what does work mean in my life? How do I find the right kinds of perspectives or places to go with my time and energy?
Okay.
So I've worked for a wide variety of brands and companies, but I'll call out CoachingAF, which is my coaching business, because that's the reason why we're here today. I have a number of people reach out to me over the last couple of months asking, what exactly is the marketplace doing right now? How should I approach my own career search, given that things are stabilizing slightly, recruiting activity is picking up, and how do I take advantage of this if I do want to make some kind of change? So I've been coaching people for the better part of the last decade. I have an MBA from Vanderbilt University, and my role as a coach has afforded me the privilege and opportunity to talk to people and, more importantly, listen to people about what they're thinking with respect to their career, whether they're 5 years out of school or 25 years out of school, or maybe they didn't go to school. Maybe they want to create their own company. So this experience, I think, has helped me to better understand exactly what kinds of questions people are asking these days. And hopefully you all will be the beneficiary of questions that I've heard over the last several years. Okay, so why are we here today? There's really three goals that I would love for you to all take away. And some of you may take one or none or all three. But first, I want to make sure that you're all informed about what exactly is happening and what's being called the Great Reshuffle or the Great Resignation. Second, love to send you home with questions that maybe you haven't thought of yet and can spur some thinking. And third, how do you get those brains of yours to think creatively about what matters most to you in your life, which, by the way, includes your career and is not just composed of your career, and more importantly, the why behind what matters to you. Now, to do so, I'm going to introduce a concept that I call a wrinkle in the brain, which is something that I coined in my coach training program, which is that feeling you get when you learn something new that changes the way that you look at things. Oh, I never thought of it that way before. How have I never known this? That's what a wrinkle in the brain is. And so my quest is to make sure that you leave with some kind of wrinkle in the brain. Now, this actually leads me to my second question, which relates to why we're here today. So again, take a moment, but ask and answer the question of what is the most critical takeaway for each of you from today's session? Is it learning about your options, identifying powerful questions to ask, maybe hearing from some of the other people on this call around what they're working through, career planning frameworks and things to stimulate thinking, or is it something that's not included in this list? So let's give it a minute. We've got about half of the attendees having voted so far, and we're moving up fast. And by the way, while you all are filling this out, I'm just looking at the locations. We've got people in Nashville, New York, Lodi, Wisconsin, Washington, DC, two from Nashville, excellent. Paramus, New Jersey, Toronto, Dallas, Chicago, oh, more Toronto, Pasadena, hi Zoro, welcome. So we've got a little bit of a mix up across the board. Okay, I'm going to give it 10 more seconds, and then I'm going to close this poll, and we will move on. Okay. So this is interesting. Majority of you are thinking career planning frameworks. We certainly have some interest in identifying powerful questions to ask, and then a smaller number around hearing from your peers. So great to hear. My intention from the upcoming slides and content will be to speak to each one of these points in some way, shape, or form. And for whomever wrote something else, if you're feeling comfortable enough to volunteering what that is in the chat, would love to hear again what you'd like to take away from this, because I will be monitoring the chat. Alrighty. So let's move on. This is the core of why we're here. Why does the Great Resignation matter to me? And to set a little bit of context on what this is, we've all just been through an incredible 18-month period of time. And something that was widely seen across the board, regardless of geographic location, industry, or company, is that many people were doing what was called sheltering in job. And some people didn't have that option because they lost their job due to reorgs or due to COVID-19. But for those people who did shelter in place or shelter in job, it was a time of deep introspection and evaluation of what matters, and also looking at what opportunities were available if a change was needed. So when you are thinking about your role in the world right now, I'm going to introduce a framework that I think everyone's going to fall into in some way, because everyone on this call or in this world is going to do one of two things, which is stay in the job that they're in or the company they're in right now, or leave it. But what differentiates these groups is whether or not they know what they're going to do, or why, or where they're going to go. So for each of these four types, they're going to have a different experience than the other groups. So for example, if you are going to stay in your company and you know what you need to do or want to do, why you're going to do it, where you're going to go, it's really about understanding, well, what's my organization going to look like? How is my role going to be affected? And so it's about thinking, what do I do next? How do I do it? And certainly, you know, if you're an entrepreneur or an aspiring entrepreneur, it's about, I know what I need to do in the context of where I currently am. Same principle. If, however, you know you need a change, but you know where you're going, we get to celebrate, right? Have a cocktail. Or if you don't drink alcohol, then have a non-alcoholic beverage. But really, it's the bottom part of this 2x2 where we're going to spend the lion's share of this conversation. Because if you don't know what you want to do, for what reasons, and where that might take you, then there are questions that are going to be more poignant or powerful for you folks here today. So if you know you need to stay in your company or role, but you don't know what you want to do, it raises a pretty big question around what you need. And if you know you need to leave for whatever reason, and it could be you need a change or something's more important to you, or you know, your manager is not the ideal manager, but you don't know what that is, then it becomes a question about where do you go? How do you pick out the destination? And how do you ensure that wherever you're going is where you need to be? So let's go through each of these four, right? And you'll find my simple abbreviations. Stay and know is the first one. I'm staying in my company and I know what I'm going to do. So starting here, you know that you're going to be in your organization or in your role, but what's going to be changing around you? The answer is the people, the structure, perhaps even the roles itself around you. So how do you handle this dislocation within your organization? Are you looking to take your manager's role? Are you looking to change functions? Are you looking to continue doing what you're doing because you love it? You know, if you're thinking about making these kinds of moves, the changes that are about to occur may take competitors for roles out of your organization. How ready are you going to be for those opportunities? And by the way, That talent migration also means people are going to come into your organization from external. So how are you going to be competitive against external candidates who may be going after the same jobs you're going after? How will those talent changes affect everyone with whom you interact with on a daily basis? That could be senior leadership in your organization. It could be your direct manager. It could be people who report to you. It might be teammates. But this is where you get to project forward and visualize. How is this going to affect everyone around me if someone leaves the team, if someone else gets promoted? The second piece here, right, is leave and know. I'm leaving my company or my role, and I know what I'm going to do. This is why I put up that little martini glass, right? Congratulations. Like, that's a really cool thing. You know what you need to do. You're making it happen. But this point about dislocation is not unique to just the stay and know people. How is talent mobility in the organization you're going to affect your ability to be successful in that role? What happens? Now, by the way, I'm always an optimist, but what happens if you know what you're going to do and then suddenly something gets in the way? That role goes to an internal candidate when it should have gone to you because there's political considerations. The role disappears because the business has decided to reorganize. How are you going to create a backup plan? So where we started here, all of this begins with this idea that we know, or you know, what you're going to do, the reasons why, and where that's going to be. And like I said, this is an advantageous place because, again, you know all this stuff definitively and with conviction, then quite frankly, you are at an advantage over a lot of other people. But as I mentioned, the primary audience of this group is people who don't necessarily know where they're going or for what reasons. Now, this group is split. So this is the stay, don't know. So people in this box might say, you know, I don't want to change companies. I'm scared of change. I don't like change. Or the opposite is, I love what I'm doing. I love the organization, but maybe I need to change what I'm going to do in this organization. I don't know. Now, the first and most important question to ask is, what do I want or need in my life that I'm missing? Now, before you roll your eyes at me and ask me if I'm serious, the reason I ask this question is that most people, my clients included, cannot answer this question when pressed when we first start working together. It seems so basic, like, what a ridiculous question. Are you kidding me? Okay, answer it. What do you want or need in your life that you're missing? How you answer this question reveals a lot, because most people will say, well, I need a job that does this, or a role that gives me that. Okay, but that's just your job. What do you need in your life? Life, career, family, friends, personal growth, physical environment, relationships. Like, what do you need in your life that you're missing? Because while it's easy to just compartmentalize in your mind that career is where you focus, if you're not happy in any other part of your life, the physical environment you're in, the activities you do, the friends you see or don't see, as we have clearly witnessed in the last year, all of that affects how productive or successful you can be in your career. So the follow-up question to this, because obviously you're all here because we're talking about careers and work, is, well, what role do I want work to play in my life? This is the question that stops people for the second time. And I think in a much more compelling way, because very rarely do people I talk with ever hear this question prior to talking to me. But what role do I want work to play in my life? Like, it's work. Yeah. And I'm not asking what role does it play. I'm asking, what role do you want it to play? I draw a lot of value from work. It's part of my identity. It helps maintain my, my knowledge, my ability to be an expert, or my ability to pay for my mortgage. Okay. So the role of work in this person's life is a provider of means to do something else. Yeah, right. Someone else might say it's a means to an end. I do it for 8 hours. I used to go home. Maybe you do work in an office or you're physically present and you can still come home. But for most people, it's work 8, 9 hours, leave. That's fine too. But ask yourself this question: what role do you want work to play in your life? And is that different from what you currently have today? The more specific version of that question you can ask is, how is my current role or organization going to deliver that? One of the things I enjoyed doing is building question trees, because you can figure out, generally speaking, where someone's response is going to go and thinking about what kinds of answers people might give. So if we got to this third question and I said, well, how is your current role or organization going to deliver that? Either it does or it doesn't. If it doesn't, okay. What happens if you don't get to have that ideal work design in your life? What are the trade-offs? How does that hurt your career? How does that hurt your career growth? Let's jump to the fourth box, the leave, don't know group. I'm leaving my company because I have to, but I don't know where or why or how. Well, the first question you have to ask is, what do I want or need in my life that I'm missing? And you're like, wait a second. You already asked me these questions. Yes, I am asking you the same two questions, because those questions are still persistent for anyone who says, I don't know what I'm going to go do. Okay. So I answer the question, what do I need in my life that I'm missing? What role do I want to work to play in my life? But what's different for this group is that the canvas you're painting on is not bound by the limits of your current role or organization. So if you know in your heart or in your mind that you need to leave this role or organization, but you don't know where you're going to go, okay? In theory, the possibilities are endless. So how do you begin to narrow or simplify the number of options out there so you're not looking at every single job or every single industry or company in the world? I'm going to pause here for a second. And as we go into this, I'm going to drop our last poll question for today, which is, which category do you fall into right now? Do you know you need to stay and you know what you're going to do? Do you know you need to leave and you don't know what you're going to do? Tell me. And while people are filling out this last poll, again, I want to open it up to questions, right? I've been doing a lot of talking here, but I would love if any of you have any questions that have not been answered so far, for you to please put those into the chat. So we'll give this another minute to get some more answers, and then we will move forward. We've got about 3/4 of the respondees to have voted. Let's get a few more, and then we'll move on to our next slide. All right, we'll go maybe 10 more seconds, and then we will close up this poll. All right, so I'm not sure if any of you are surprised by this, but I'm not. I think that this is kind of what I expected from this group, which is that 3/5 of you out there are thinking you're going to leave, but you don't necessarily know where to. About 1/3 of you know you want to stay, but don't know what you're about to do. And 2 of you out there are very much fortunate because you have a perspective of, I know where I'm going. One of you is going to stay, one of you is going to leave. So kudos to you all. So from that, we're going to step into some of the frameworks that I alluded to earlier. So as you go through your career, this is something I put together for coaching clients to understand some of the steps that occur within career journeys. And on the vertical axis, you have job satisfaction, happiness, joy in life. So higher, better. And on the horizontal axis from left to right, you have time. So when you think about the steps that occur in your career, this is not the entirety of your career. It certainly is a phase or piece of it. There are moments when you're going to get hard questions. By the way, this is not exactly linear. It's not always going to be that the next step makes you that much happier, but just work with me for a few minutes. Hard questions typically create introspection. Like, oh, maybe I don't love this. I went to law school, but I don't love being a lawyer. Well, how do I do anything but law? I've already paid, $300,000 for law school debt. I have to. Well, then there are gut check moments. And some of them are provided by ourselves, and others can be provided externally. Whether it's a reorganization or reduction in force or an elimination of a role or a closing of a plant. So what happens from gut checks? You have a conversation. Marta, I lost my job. Like, I'm really concerned. Like, can we talk about what I'm going through? Well, Edith, I just really needed someone to chat with because I've just been really frustrated and I lost my role. Totally fair. That's when brain wrinkles start to happen around what matters to you. What do you need to do? That concept I mentioned earlier about you learn something. Maybe it's about the environment or the world, or maybe it's about yourself. Oh, I actually don't care about this. And what happens from there? Exploration. Now, given that we're talking about careers and jobs, in parentheses, I put how these next few steps can manifest in your job search. So as you begin to get deeper dives into that exploration, it might be not an application, but an interview at a company. Opportunities create themselves. Could be a job offer, could be a conversation for a company you never considered or a role you never thought about. The breakthrough. New job, right? And then there's a concept called quantum changes. And if you've never heard of quantum changes, I'll see if I can find a link and share it in the chat before we wrap up. It's a wonderful Wall Street Journal article. But quantum changes speak to, quote, long-lasting, often unplanned shifts in one's identity. And these can come in so many shapes and forms. So personally speaking, I had one of these as a result of my mother passing away from lung cancer 5 years ago. And I've heard people tell me similar stories, not always sad like mine, but about how their life got changed forever by one trip to Asia or to the African subcontinent, or from one conversation with a person or one experience that completely shifted their perspective on the world. And you can break these kind of pieces of the career journey up into 3 stages. You don't know what you want. And by the way, we have all been there. So if you're there, don't worry, you're in good company. You do know what you want. And the last piece is you get what you want. Now, does everyone's journey have to go through this every single step? I think quite a few of these, yeah. You might skip 1 or 2. You might have it out of order. The gut check might give you hard questions and then introspection. The conversations may lead to opportunities, totally fair. But a lot of these steps will happen to you at some point, either the next year or in the upcoming cycle. Any questions on the career journey? I can't see. I see Philip. Thank you for the thumbs up. Anyone else with thumbs up questions? Does all make sense? See, you guys are on a video, so I don't know whether you're like zoning out or you're like, yeah, this is awesome. Oh, look at my thumbs up. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Amelie. Thank you, Callie. And by the way, my screen doesn't let me see every single video, so I'm hoping I gave everyone credit who put that up, but thank you. Thank you, Kelsey. Okay. Thank you, Justine, appreciate it. So this is the second framework that I'm going to introduce to you all. And this is something that I bring up to all of my coaching clients, and it's how to look at jobs and careers in context by posing a big question to you, which is, what matters most to you in your work? Now, note that I did not say what matters most to you in a job. Right. You'll see in a moment that we will get to that. But in your work, what is the most important thing? So let's build a structure, and let's start with this idea. And again, I'm working off the assumption that many of you work for an organization. If you're currently an entrepreneur or wanting to build your own small business, it actually still applies, but let's stick with the corporate or nonprofit government type example for a bit. There are different industries out there, and it could be you work in oil and gas, or you work in high tech, financial services, or you work in nonprofit government or other types of institutions. And guess what? There are companies in those industries. Oh, I work for Northrop Grumman. Oh, you work in aerospace. Got it. Okay. So at the industry level, there are characteristics that you can ascribe which might be important to you as you're considering where to go or what to do. Now, I've only put a few examples here, but hopefully they'll start you thinking around what are characteristics of industries? For example, what is the historical reputation for this industry? Is it been known for a place where people can develop? Is it slow to change? How about representation? Do people who look like me, sound like me, are they represented in this industry or are they not? What's rewarded? Hard work, competition, innovative ideas. And by the way, each one of these dimensions will be different depending on what industry you're looking at. So for example, if you look at the automotive industry, what is the historical reputation of the automotive industry?
Stodgy, old.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. I appreciate you being honest though. Yeah, it can be stodgy, right? But depending on what kind of company you go to, maybe Tesla breaks that mold. What is the capacity for change in the automotive industry? I mean, how did Ford compete against the likes of Toyota? Again, right? I'm using these examples. Let's take it down a level though, into the company itself. So at the company level, what matters to you? Is it the culture? Maybe for some of you, it's diversity, equity, and inclusion or belonging. How about the senior leadership? Are they representative of the employee base that they manage or the communities that they sit in? How about size of organization? Some people say, I really want to go work for Microsoft. Okay, it's a huge company. How do you deal with large company politics and dynamics? I never thought of it that way. You will think of it day one when you're in a very large organization if you've never been in that organization. How about power or hierarchy? And this speaks to organizational models. If you know, for example, you love a company that has top-down power structure with very clear definition of roles and responsibilities, like the military, for example, that is different than a grassroots campaign for a politician, where the power is actually at the base, not at the top. Let's go down a level. In every company, you're going to have business units and functions. Well, how can I advance within that function? Can I go be a financial analyst and then a director and then a senior vice president or CFO? How can I grow within that business unit? Which, by the way, also applies to a company. Same with learning. How important is that function within that organization? The best example I could think of is at Google, research development, product, engineering. That leads it. If you were in one of those functions, that function has a greater importance than sales, than marketing. And by the way, this is what I hear from my friends who work at Google. So if any of you work at Google and you want to challenge me on that, you're more than welcome to do so. But certainly companies have a hierarchy with respect to their functions sometimes. Let's go down one more layer. They're at the team level. What's that team look like? Am I the only in that team? The only man? The only woman, the only person of color, the only trans employee, the only lesbian employee? Are you the only? How's autonomy given or not given to employees within that team or within that company? What's my manager like? Do I care? I need a manager who's really hands-off. I need a manager who will be like hands-on and teach me everything. Okay. How are they going to coach me? Now we're at the individual level. That's you, right? What's the job? What are the responsibilities you're going to be doing in the work? What's in it for you? Is it compensation? Is it meaningful work? Is it smart people? Is it people who are older or more seasoned than you? Is it people who are younger and more, naive to the world than you? That doesn't matter. What matters is that you ask yourself what you want from this. Now, once you started to build this list, you're not done. It's not just about having this top to bottom industry to individual list. It's about, well, which of these matter the most? And I'll give you an example. When I was thinking about career changes a few years ago, it was, well, the responsibilities and work are really important to me because I want to make sure I'm getting experience in certain work facets. But the culture and diversity, equity, inclusion is really important to me. Okay, so the responsibilities were 1, the culture is 2, opportunities for advancement was 3, compensation was 4. Okay, now I've got my list. And it's not just the characteristics of the job or the team or the company or industry, it's all that put together so that when I'm shopping for an option or when a recruiter reaches out to me, I know what's important to me. Thank you for the outreach. Can you tell me more about the responsibilities? Okay, good. Number 1 on my list is accomplished. Tell me more about the culture. We firmly believe in diversity and inclusion. Here's how we support our employees with employee resource groups. Great. Number 2. It's kind of like when people go shopping for houses or apartments, which I know right now is a very sensitive subject, but you don't know what you want. Why would you go look at studios if you know you need 3 bedrooms and a garage? This framework is designed to help you begin to identify what are the dimensions that you need to be vetting every opportunity against so you can figure out, is this something I want to spend my time doing? Any questions on this? So, last slide, and then we'll open up for questions. What do I do about this? Okay. Some of you might be saying, nothing needs to change. I'm fine where I am. Good. If that's the case, you are good. But if you're not, and for many others that may not be the case, then the question now becomes, what do you do about it? So if you today know that something needs to change, you can go 2 ways with this. I told you I love question trees and decision trees, right? You can do it by yourself. And by the way, this is a completely legitimate path, despite what any coach or any consultant might say. What are you going to do? You can read or learn. And by the way, I recommend 2 books, Designing Your Life and Designing Your Work Life. If you haven't read either, Designing Your Life is kind of all-inclusive. Designing Your Work Life is specifically around careers, but both are amazing books written by 2 professors at the design school at Stanford. You might seek out people. You might go have LinkedIn conversations. You might have coffee now that hopefully you can meet people face-to-face. You might experiment. You might go apply for jobs. You might, take a chance on a job that's in, completely different from what you're doing and maybe not as immediately applicable to your skill set or experience. Yeah, if you can do any of this stuff, absolutely do it. The alternative is do it with help. By the way, that's me right here, right? And it could be someone, it could be a friend, it could be an advisor, a mentor, right? But talking it out. The value of externalizing something is you get to either confirm it, thus increasing your conviction, or you reject it and you don't waste your time on it. And you basically call yourself out on your own bullshit. See, I told you I was going to swear. Introspection. This goes back to that point about how do you come to terms with some of these realizations? I can't tell you to do anything, but you can. And when you turn your thoughts inward, powerful things begin to emerge. Take action. How do you combine both discussion and introspection? Well, you can take action with it. And the combination of these 3 can lead you to do it right. You read or learn about the right things so you don't waste your time digging into things that, quite frankly, may not be a good fit for you. you seek out the right people. Maybe you have 30 conversations, with people about jobs, but what if 25 of them are for industries that you would never work in because you are morally or ethically opposed to what they do? You can still have those. Might be really valuable from a networking perspective, but is that time spent in the right place? And with experimentation, are you trying the right things? So I promised you that I would spend 40 minutes on content. I am literally on the dot. If you want to follow any of my pages, you're more than welcome to do so. Whip out your phone. There's 3 QR codes. My website is coachingaf.com. My LinkedIn page and my personal page are both here as well. And if you have questions and you want to email me afterwards, Aaron@coachingaf.com, which, by the way, for any non-millennials out there, ask a millennial what anything AF is and you'll understand what AF is. By the way, it's also my initials. But I'm happy to take any questions that any of you have.
Aaron,
Yes. Hello, Marta.
Marta Mazzola here. I'm going to keep my video up because I'm not Zoom ready.
You're good.
So this is gives me a ton to think about, and I know myself well enough to know that introspection is probably the worst, my biggest weakness and my biggest threat, to be fair. But I'd like to also add, if I may, that in the framework, how to look for jobs and careers and context, at least for me, and because I am in an active job search, the goals, the vision, mission, goals, and of the company are really important to me. Even though I'm casting as wide a net as possible, yes, culture is clear, compensation is clear, leadership and size of organization are all, they're all valid. But I would also add, and I think what's a key thing that's missing for many workers in employment today, or what does my company stand for? What does my company want to do? What's the vision? And then does that align with my personal vision, values, and mission? If that makes sense.
Wonderful call out, because I think that alignment of vision and values and mission is certainly something I didn't explicitly put out there, but like you said, that's a great point. And I think it's something I'll definitely add to my visual. But for all of you thinking about what a company stands for, like, what do they stand for? Is that something you can get behind?
And it's okay, to figure out what the company stands for and either be behind it or not. But I mean, that's a critical juncture. I moved from one company where I spent much of my career and loved 95% of the time until they restructured, right, the company, and then went to another company, which I thought was very similar in size, similar in structure, and in hierarchy and power, et cetera, et cetera. And I hated it. Different industry. I thought I'd try something new, and didn't like it at all, because while I stood for the company's mission, vision, and values, and they were very much aligned to mine, the way they went about it and ultimately how they created the culture was not, which led me to leave.
And there's a ton of value in finding something that you don't like, because then there's a reason why you don't like it. There's a reason why it's not the right fit. And I tell people all the time, like, if you can actually find more of those, it crosses that option off the list. But most people don't spend their life hopping from one industry or one role to another, so they don't get a chance to try things to say, I do love it or don't. So thank you for making that call. I think it's a great call out.
Thank you. This is great.
Yeah, of course. Any other questions? You're all a quiet bunch. I know you probably have something you might want to ask afterwards, so I won't put you on the spot. If you would like any of the visuals that I shared today, just send me an email, Aaron@coachingaf.com. If you have other questions that I didn't answer or address that you'd like to ask, drop me a line. Let me know. Follow my page on LinkedIn, and I post post a lot of content there, which might be helpful for many of you out there.
That'd be great. Aaron, I do have another question.
Yeah, hit me.
So much, and I'm sorry for monopolizing, but
You're good.
how often do you run these sessions?
This is actually my first. It's funny you mentioned that. Normally, I just have one-on-one conversations, but I'm actually thinking about making this a more frequent series. So if you follow my LinkedIn page, I will continue to post when I do more sessions like this. I actually had some requests from clients to do a masterclass on OneNote and note taking, which I know is a very niche thing, but it certainly affects how people become productive. So if there are other topics that people don't like, want to hear more of, again, feel free to reach out to me by email, or you can put it in the chat right now, and I will be happy to consider those for future sessions.
Well, this has been fantastic, so thank you. And this is a great. You've done a great job.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Very, very much. This may be a silly question, so just bear with me. But the Great Resignation has, I don't know, just has some meaning to me, and it may be in my mind. Is there a time and place that this is going to happen, or is this evolving? Is this an evolving phenomenon, or I'll be quiet.
If I had the answer to that, I would be buying lottery tickets and basically be predicting the future. It's not happening at one particular place or at one particular time, but the consensus is that people have a lot of pent up desires for change right now with respect to their careers, and are exploring that as we speak. Certain industries are seeing it more than others, and there are certain jobs and functions that are always in demand. And those continue to be in demand, especially even if you look at food and beverage, servers. It's very difficult to find people right now to work in restaurants, fast food, fast casual, etc. Right? So I don't think it's concentrated to any one specific place. It's kind of across the board, depending on what your interests are and what your industry you're focusing on. I want to answer Amy's question real quick because she did ask, any idea how many people are resigning due to COVID versus those who would have done anyway? It's a wonderful question. I don't have the answer to that. And I think it would be challenging to try to find that information because obviously you have different sources of information, and what people are willing to acknowledge as the reason behind their departure is always very opaque and very difficult to suss out. Even with companies that do exit interviews, certainly there are questions you cannot ask or don't want to ask, or that the person leaving may not want to address. I have to imagine some people resigning due to COVID infection or circumstances related to that. And again, the estimates on who's going to be shifting very dramatically. There was an article posted on CNBC, which was citing a Monster.com survey saying 95% of people are thinking about changing. Now, thinking about changing and actually changing are two different things. But, and certainly I don't remember how big the survey size was, but the fact that many people are indicating their openness to change and or action, orientation towards, shifting is pretty big. So I know I can't really answer that question definitively, Amy, but hopefully that kind of responds to your question as a starting point. Other questions out there? Okay. Thank you, Dave. I appreciate it. I hope all of you have found this helpful in some way, shape, or form. If you want to have another conversation around career coaching, feel free to reach out. If you know folks who might be interested or struggling through this process too, same thing. Always happy to have a conversation, no charge, no expectations at all. But I hope all of you have a wonderful rest of your week. And more importantly, good luck with your career search. I hope you find what you love and get a chance to do it.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.